Welcome everyone to the Starting Point Education channel. My name is Loretta Depka, and I'm here with one of our favorite practitioners, Pat Obst, who is an LCSW and is joining us tonight for the continuation of the Loss of a Loved One series. Tonight's topic is loss of a spouse, significant other. As you know, loss of a spouse or significant other can be due to death or a more ambiguous loss such as divorce or a debilitating disease like Alzheimer's or a severe stroke. But tonight we're going to focus on loss due to death. Loss of a spouse or a significant other can happen to anyone at any age and in any stage of the relationship or family dynamic. This loss can occur when you're young with no children, when you have young children, when you're in middle age, and when you've been together for many decades. There are specific challenges to each of these stages of loss, but tonight Pat is going to give us a broad overview of what's involved when someone loses a spouse or a significant other, and what you can do to find support with your grieving, your healing, and your process of moving towards recreating your life after this significant loss. Pat, I guess the first question really is, the loss of a spouse or a significant other can really rock your world and cause you to feel very lost. What can people do to start to get their footing again?
Well, I think one of the main things is to realize that when you experience the death of someone you love, you live with, and you depend on, there's a feeling of disorientation that's natural because, you're used to having that person, come through the door every day. Or if you're not living together yet, you're still used to the phone calls or getting together on the Friday nights or whatever it may be. So there's a disorientation that I think is important for people to recognize. And your grief is unique because no one else had the same relationship that you do with your spouse or your significant other. So it's not, even their friends, everybody has, everybody's relationship with someone who has died is unique, but the uniqueness of someone that you're in an emotionally intimate and physically intimate relationship with, it's just much more intense and unique, in part because of those two things. Often people don't acknowledge all that they've lost beyond the loss of the person, and we're going to cover a lot of that tonight. That it's very broad what's been lost when your spouse or your significant other passes. It's also important to be aware of what you have lost so that you can address those losses specifically rather than with one, kind of broad stroke. Oh, I lost my husband, I lost my boyfriend, I lost my, partner. So as we go through tonight, I'm going to cover some of those things so that people can grapple more specifically with them and therefore, help themselves along better.
Why don't you jump in there and talk about what are the things that get lost when the person you're so connected to dies?
So your go-to person, right?
Good point.
When you have, good news or bad news, right? They're you talk to them, you know what they would say. And that's actually one of the things that when they've passed, I suggest that people continue to do. Talk to them. You know what they would say because you've been with them so long. So that's one of the ways that you can kind of keep that connection going. They're your best friend. A lot. Let's hope anyway. that they're your best friend, and that part really just it has to be grieved. Even if you have other friends, that specific friend, you have to. You're allowing yourself to feel the emotions fully. That's what it really means to grieve that. A person you loved, usually, hopefully anyway, they loved you unconditionally. They knew you and they accepted you, warts and all. And you're losing that person who saw you that way. You know, they're the ones who have seen you in the morning.
Without your makeup, right?
Yeah. You know, they know your isms, and your quirks and all that. So again, you know, that has to be grieved, but also, it, it reminds us that self-love is so important, because here's this person who loved us, warts and all, and now they're gone. We can tap into that by trying to see ourselves through their eyes and remembering that that's the way they looked at us. And that can help us to maintain a sense of self-love. This person is a person you shared, you know, physical intimacy, and comfort with. And that's where the tangible keepsakes and things come in. You know, it's really important, you know, to have those things that you can sleep with, that you can touch, because, you know, your significant other, you touch them a lot. And so you need things that you can wrap your arms around and wrap your hands around. And you know, that's why I suggest, you know, people don't go in with one fell swoop and get rid of everything, right? You want to look through their clothes and things and know, what do I want to keep? What sweatshirts and t-shirts do I want to wear? And that sort of thing. Because it's a very physical relationship. So you need physical things. This person, you know, you share daily life and living space with. I remember, I don't remember if it was a podcast or what it was exactly, but widows and widowers were sharing their stories. And this one woman said, I miss hearing my husband's, just the screen door closing, like that sound, because it meant that he was home from work. And older gentleman said, I missed the clanging of the dishes when I came home from work, because it meant my wife was putting dinner on the table. Now, I know that sounds like very traditional roles, but that's what these particular stories were. So a lot of times it's the littlest things, right? And those are the things that I encourage people to write about, so that you can remember them and hold on to them, and just close your eyes and let yourself hear those sounds again, those familiar things.
Are you suggesting like a grief journal there, or just capturing some of the memories?
It's sometimes people combine the two. I suggest they do them separately.
Okay.
Where, you know, one is more of just, you know, they're kind of pouring out their feelings, right? You know, the I misused and what am I going to do? And, you know, letting that all roll out. And then the other is, you know, the capturing of the memories, because eventually, you know, as you move forward, you want to bring their life forward with you. You know, even if you go on to remarry or whatever, these were chapters in your life that were real. They don't disappear because the person dies. And so to have those memories written down are important, because they've become part of our story. So yeah, a lot of times it's best to do it separately. They may have been your co-parent, right? And now, you know, you're having to deal with the kids on your own. And that's where you really need to call on your support system. You know, grandparents, aunts, uncles, older cousins, because, you know, when you're used to being, you know, a united front with the kids, and now all of a sudden you're one person to try to do it all. Maybe for a short period of time you can do that, and I'm not saying anybody's going to replace the other parent, but you need that support so that you can do your own grieving too. A lot of times, parents will come to me, you know, especially mothers, way later, after they've made sure their kids were set. You know, they got this kid in counseling, and that kid, you know, all straightened back out with school after the loss of their father, and you know, the poor mother comes to me in you know, exhausted and not having had any support herself. And so I suggest that, yes, I get that you're a mother and you want to make sure your kids are set, but you can do both. You can also get your own support. And they were, let's not forget that they were a partner in the upkeep of your home and your finances, right? And sometimes you can get, the home, you got to maybe let that go for a little bit. Right.
That sounds like a great idea.
And hopefully, friends and family will come in. But
Right.
there's an organization, I'm going to talk about some supports at the end, called People in Transition. Now, there's divorced people as well as widowed people in there. It's through Gloucester County. And I'll give the information at the end. That they have a lot of very cost-effective courses, like maybe it's 3 courses or it's 1 course, and there's different information that can help you, like with financial stuff and different, more practical things.
What is the difference between a divorce and a death?
Well, a divorce was going to be a whole other topic. They're very similar. They're very similar. And I was actually going to do that in here. And I thought, you know what, that's going to turn into a 2-hour podcast.
Okay.
So there's a lot of the same feelings, right? I mean, you've lost the security of that marriage.
Right.
And everything is in this upheaval. I mean, there's a lot of similar nuances to it, but with a divorce, a lot of times you get off on the track of anger and trying to stick it to the other person, or that. So there's some other sticky stuff involved with a divorce.
So there's still somebody to fight with.
And it's more of an ambiguous loss.
Okay.
Where the person's here, but they're not here in the same way they were.
Right. Okay.
So that's why I decided, you know what, let's just focus on this.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about the feelings that someone experiences and the changes that they face when they lose a spouse or a significant other?
Survivor's guilt is a common one. That's perfectly normal for people.
Even when it's, a medical reason that someone dies, not an accident. Or...
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear people say, "Oh, it should have been me instead of her.
Okay.
It should have been me instead of him." You'll hear that especially when one person's been more sickly, and then it's the other person who dies.
Okay.
Then they feel like, oh, I should have been the one to die. I'm the one who's all crippled up, or like my partner and her parents. Her mother was very crippled up with rheumatoid arthritis, and it was her father who got lung cancer and died in 6 weeks.
Right.
So there was that. Everybody thought that she would go first. And we ended up taking care of her. She lived for another 12 years. We took such good care of her. But yeah, that's very normal. And people didn't do anything wrong. This is just that chaos of life kind of thing that we have to accept. They get sometimes angry, the feelings of anger that they left you. Rationally they didn't leave you and abandon you, but it feels like they left. And so they're, again, perfectly normal to have anger for a little bit, but it's really, the anger is not really at the person, it's at the circumstance. It's at the unfairness. It's at the oh my God, now I have to take care of everything. It's not really about the parent. It's not really at the person generally. That's in divorce.
Right.
In this, a lot of times there's a delayed grief. Again, like I said, because you're taking care of kids maybe, or if you're older, it might be all of a sudden now you have to take care of the either your in-laws or your own parents by yourself, as opposed to both of you helping to take care of that generation.
Sure.
And so you might delay your own grief, to which I say, even if you've got to tie up all those loose ends, come back to it, and really process it. Don't think, oh, it's been 9 months, I might as well just move on. You really do need to process it. Scared, right? How am I going to survive? How am I going to do this? And you know, it's different for people at different, you know, if it's a significant other, or you know, you're married without children, it's, you know, I got all these all these years to still live, you know, am I going to have another partner in life? And you know, I don't really want to be seeking that out again, at any age, really. Does anybody really want to do that? Unless they absolutely have to in this circumstance. They're also, you know, when you have kids, then you're scared about, what am I going to do, you know, as far as my kids are concerned. And, you know, there's financial concerns. So there's a lot of fear. Again, the more support you can get around you, and possibly a therapist who can help you to sort it out. Fear comes when we're overwhelmed. A therapist can help us to sort it out and take it in smaller bites. So that's some of the support. Lonely, you know, there's a loneliness, absolutely.
Sure.
And that we have to just sit with and grieve through. And then eventually, I mean, we kind of have to make friends with the loneliness for a while. And if we think of it more as honoring that relationship, then it doesn't feel so much like loneliness as much as alone time to honor that grief. See the difference?
That's a thin line there, though, don't you think? I mean,
That's in what?
it feels like that's a really thin line of knowing the difference between the kind of, you know, being with yourself and alone versus loneliness.
Well, and you just said it, the way that I say it to a lot of people is to be with yourself. That's one of the ways that you can kind of combat loneliness, is instead of being by myself, be with yourself.
Okay.
Because when you're with yourself, you're doing things that you want to do. My stepmom, she got hooked on jigsaw puzzles after my father died. And that was a way of her being with herself in her loneliness. It was something that she enjoyed doing. And then she started getting, you know, puzzles as gifts. She bought a special table to do it with. And see, now it's not so lonely.
Okay.
To do it. The living space feels empty. There's an emptiness too, right? You know, where there used to be, again, the sound of the screen door and that sort of thing.
And there's always those little wives' tales that come into play where you shouldn't sell the house for a year, or you shouldn't. So all those shouldn'ts are very personal, right?
Well, they're very personal, and they're, I mean, sometimes it's a financial thing that you don't have much choice, right? But a lot of times there is a choice. Yeah, I mean, the general rule of thumb of not making big decisions for a year still holds true unless you absolutely have to, because it just takes time because otherwise we're reacting instead of responding. And we need time for the dust to settle. We need time to sort things out. We need time to get information. We need time to get other supports on board, and, you know, a financial planner or a lawyer or a realtor and that sort of thing. So, you know, a knee-jerk reaction is generally not a good idea unless it's absolutely imperative. We feel pressure to do right by our loved one who died. And sometimes people get twisted up in that because they think, well, my spouse would have done it this way. You know, but that doesn't work for me. So you don't have to do everything exactly as they would have done or they would have wanted. You're not doing anything wrong if you do that. Responsibility of being the keeper of your loved ones' memories, especially if you have young children, right? Where are all those memories going to be? And I encourage people not to think of it as a pressure, but as a privilege. As a privilege to be the keeper of the memories. And to share them in a way that that keeps that connection there. If you have young kids, you feel like they're missing out because they don't have, the mom or the dad. I have a client whose mother died when she was 5, but her father was a very involved father, and her aunt, who was a lot like her mom, stepped in, and she didn't have a whole lot of mental upheaval with that because she had so much support around her. So sometimes we think that the kids, so they're missing out on that person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the kids are going to be all messed up. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That if they have love and they have support and they know that their mom or dad, didn't leave them, that a disease took them or whatever, they'll and help them to connect with them through the keepsakes and that sort of thing, they fare better. Your relationship with your family members changes. I mean, that's in any loss. Family members, friends, the dynamics between them. How many times do people step up that you didn't think were going to step up, and people don't step up who you thought would, right?
Great.
So, that's just a similar thing, which is why your support system, you need to shift things around and don't go to the dry well and expect from people who aren't able or willing to give you the support. And lastly, the reality and discomfort of knowing you have to live the rest of your life without them. Again, that's an acceptance of loss. Accepting that. But I think we talked in one of the other podcasts about acceptance meaning cooperation.
Right.
As we begin to heal, we need to start to say, this is real. I need to work with it. Because woulda, coulda, shouldas, they're working against it. Right? There needs to come a point where we say, I need to work with this and get the support I need for myself, for my kids, whatever it may be.
Pat, there's always that point in time when you're with someone who has lost a significant other or a spouse that you don't know if they want to talk about the person or they don't want to talk about a person. How do you let them know that you're there without constantly bringing up the other person or not?
Well, so first of all, you're not, the loss of that person is in the forefront of their mind. You're not bringing up something that they weren't thinking about. So that's the first thing
That's a great point. Absolutely.
It's not like they say, oh yeah, I wasn't thinking about that. They're going to be thinking about it for quite a long time. It's going to be right in the front of their brain. Okay. So don't be afraid that you're going to do that. And the other thing is, let the person tell you. Like, if you bring up that loss or that person, if the person really doesn't want to talk about it, they'll say they don't want to talk about it. But more often, the grieving person invites that and is comforted by that. More often, they want to hear that you're still thinking about them. They want to hear that you're still wondering how they're doing. They want to hear the person's name. So I always suggest to say the name. Right?
Sure.
So yeah, definitely don't avoid it.
And then, we were talking about this the other day, and people feel that they've lost a piece of themselves or a part of their sense of security. What can someone who has lost a spouse do to regain some sense of control over themselves and start living again?
So loss of identity is a big one, right? That you're a husband or a wife or a spouse or a partner. One of the things that I try to drive home to people is that you are still, like, that identity will never leave you. In other words, once you've been someone's husband, wife, spouse, significant other, you always will, that'll always be part of your story. So you're losing the identity as far as, actively being in that role, but not in your heart. No, you were always, like, for instance, my stepmom, always Pete's wife, always, forever. You see what I'm saying? She's seeing someone new, always Pete's wife. That's always part of her story and her identity. There's also a loss of safety, right? The security of not only the relationship, but the home, the support, the work and life together, financially. Although in some ways you have to plan for the future, staying present, that saying, take care of today, tomorrow will take care of itself.
Good advice, always.
Encourage people as far as that safe, because if we get afraid, boy, we can really go down a rabbit hole, right? So to keep coming back to safety, what can I control? What's just the next step that I can take, instead of trying to figure it all out at once and doing the oh my God, what if stuff. So the best way for us to get back to feeling safe and secure is, what can I control just today? Or what action can I take just today? The possibility actually of financial losses or gains. Sometimes there is a financial windfall, and that can cause all kinds of family troubles. Okay.
That was always my dad's line. I'm worth more dead than alive.
Oh, right. Right. So, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. But if there are financial struggles because of the loss of a spouse or a significant other, again, one of the resources I'm going to talk about, that People in Transition, again, can help with that. There's a loss of autonomy, that, you kind of can feel independent even though you're in a relationship. There's, you're both doing your thing, but you're also sharing. And then all of a sudden you feel like you have to depend on everybody, right? So there's a loss of autonomy.
And you feel that in your social circles, right?
Right. But it's only for a time. It's only for a time until the dust settles and you get on your feet again, and that sort of thing. And we all look. It takes a village just to be a person. It's not just it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village for all of us to live our lives. And no man is an island, right? So it's important that we see it as temporary and not a forever kind of thing. Loss of sense of control. There's that chaos that we have to accept, that chaos is part of life, and controlling what we can. A loss of dreams and expectations. That's probably the biggest one, right? That even if it's a couple who's celebrated their 49th wedding anniversary, right? There was a dream that they would make 50. You know, so it's not just the younger people. Or there's the dream of, you know, we'll get to see our great grandkids together, and then, you know, one of them dies. So, you know, those dreams and expectations, that's a big part of the loss. But, and that's a little harder if you're much older. But if you're, you know, younger than 80, you know, dreams and expectations can come at any, in fact, I was just reading a quote about, you know, doing this at 30 and that at 40 and that at 50 and that at 60 and that at 70, and just, there's no, if we can always evolve and learn and grow until our last breath, why can't we also dream and have expectations and goals?
When you put it that way.
Right?
Good.
And so again, you know, as the healing happens and as you start to move forward, and, you know, whether it's getting remarried, my aunt and uncle, my aunt was engaged. Her fiance died in a motorcycle accident. She ended up marrying my uncle, my dad's brother, and, you know, they had 4 beautiful girls. Can you imagine 4 girls? Oy. 4 beautiful girls together, and my uncle just passed about a year ago, but they were together for over 50 years. So, you know, there can be the healing and the moving forward, but you have to cooperate with the grieving process. Get the support you need. I identified these, and I hope I really gave a good picture of all that you lose and all that changes and all that shifts. Because if you just kind of lump it together, I'm a widower, I'm a widower, it's harder to sort it out and get the help you need and get the support you need.
And I guess what I, you know, see when generations change and women are now have things outside of the house and have their own careers, but I see past generations still sort of stuck in that mode that they're sort of just hanging out so they can die and be with their spouse again. And that's so sad because they have a lot to offer.
It's sad, but if that's their choice, that's their choice.
Right.
So
that's how they can bear it, right?
Right. And it's also why, even though, you know, when I have what's called a relationship template, and I'll just end with this. I have what's called a relationship template, and it's for people who might be in a relationship that they think maybe they need to leave, or people who are just starting out dating, whether they got divorced, breakup, death. And the first question in that is, who do I want and need to be in a relationship? So that they really get a good idea of who they want to maintain as themselves, because we can lose ourselves in a relationship, right? And so, you know, hopefully with the younger generation, because a lot of people have their own careers and that sort of thing, they don't lose as much of themselves when a spouse or significant other passes. They lose a lot, but maybe they don't lose as much of themselves.
And it doesn't mean they love them any less. Right?
No, it has nothing to do with the love part.
Right.
Yeah. The love part is the love part, period. So just a couple supports. Certainly, you know, Samaritan Hospice has support groups for people of all ages. And you don't have to have gone through Samaritan in order to use their resources. And they have a general one, but they also have ones for spouses. Helpinghands.org. I think it's Helping Hand, singular. That's up in Medford. That's a support, and they do also do Zoom meetings. They meet together, and usually George or Wanda, they're the two who run it. It's at Alliance Church in Medford. They usually talk about a topic or something, and then everybody splits into a separate group. And one of those groups is loss of a spouse or significant other.
Okay.
That's another support. And then the people in transitions, probably best if I give you the link, Loretta, because then you can do that. And then there's a woman by the name of Christina Rasmussen, Rasmussen. Christina is with a Christina. She's the author of a book called Second Firsts. She lost her husband when her children were young. And she has a Facebook page and a big following. And I think she wrote a second book as well. But that's a good resource too.
Okay. Yeah, we can just tag those resources on the information piece.
Right.
On the podcast.
Yeah, and I'll send that people in transitions thing to you.
Okay, great. Well, Pat, this was really helpful. It's different. It's different than the loss of a parent that we've already done, or as we come up on loss of a child that we're actually doing in two parts. Mm-hmm. This is a lot of helpful information.
Good.
So you can find this podcast if you want to share it with a friend on startingpoint.org. You want to go to the education tab, or you can go to the YouTube icon on any page at the website and click on it, and that will take you right to our YouTube channel where we are storing all our videos. All our podcasts, topics including forgiveness, addiction, anger management, and Pat has done a number of grief and loss for us that you can also find. So thank you for joining us, and please join us next week for loss of a child. Pat, as always, thanks a million.
All right. Take care, everyone.